Hi everyone, this is Jasmine and CJ. We are the writer and illustrator, respectively, of Holding Demons in Small Jars. And we're really excited because we haven't seen each other in 2 years. We completely conceived of the novel from a distance. Her being on the West Coast in California, and me being in the South, East Coast in North Carolina. So, the book is out now. We've both been doing our forms of promotion. I've been doing several readings across North Carolina as well as one in Maryland. She's been doing radio interviews and podcasts, and we haven't had a chance to actually sit down together in the same physical space to talk about the book.
Yes.
So we're sitting here in North Carolina, and we wanted to take
Turquoise House.
at the Turquoise House. We wanted to take some time to just tell you guys a little bit about Holding Demons, tell you guys a bit about our process, our friendship, and just how we really came to have the opportunity to really work on what I think was a really important work for both of us.
And I still remember that email you sent. So it was quite elaborate, huh?
Yeah. So, I wrote the text completely. And, initially I didn't really have necessarily thoughts of publishing it. But I wrote this text and I remember feeling a sense that it was unfinished. And one day I was on Facebook and I saw some work from CJ that was really different from what I know her traditionally to do. So much of her work, I think, is more abstract, not so figurative, really.
I think that was when I started messing around with the iPad.
Yeah.
And then I started to use the program called Paper.
Yeah, so she was using this program called Paper.
Yeah.
And she was doing these absolutely beautiful illustrations.
And I did one portrait of you for your birthday.
And you did a portrait. Now I was like, okay, 2 and 2 is coming together. And I remember sitting down and thinking, wow, this is such a heavy text. Wouldn't it be awesome to have illustrations that kind of break some of that heaviness? And so I sat down and I wrote this really elaborate email to her, asking her, because I wasn't taking it for granted that she would want to work on this project. But I asked her, I told her a little bit about where I was in the text and how I wanted to illustrate it. And I know she was hesitant at first in the sense that she has never done that before.
Yeah.
I don't think she had ever worked with a writer to illustrate a novel. But I trusted in her. I really think I felt that it was a right fit. We have been friends since college, since undergrad.
We have been following each other's career after
That's
graduation.
True. After graduation. So, supporting each other, her as being a full-time artist, me on a very meandering path that involved grad school and city planning, something that's very different from sort of the writing I do. But we were very supportive, I think, of our creative work. Our friendship, in a very strange way, I think people's friendships, ebb when they leave each other physically. But we actually had a very opposite effect. Our friendship deepened after undergrad. We became even closer than we were while we were geographically sort of in these very different spaces.
We call this the distance friendship.
So our distance friendship that we've maintained for 7 years now.
Yeah.
And this is almost a gift to that friendship, really.
And also reminding how we are on a very parallel path on searching and telling our stories by starting from our past, by confronting our past. And then I still remember when you were in my studio looking at all the swirls I have for my honors thesis work senior year, and you're like, those swirls look like the Sankofa bird, that is from the Ghanaian one of those design, I think. And then and I immediately look it up, and I was like, I love the message. It's about looking backwards in order to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And then both of us are in the path where we were desperately trying to find ways to move forward.
Mm.
And then we derived, we found a formula that is sort of, we have to look backward first. We have to confront our past first.
Oh, that's so great. That's so great because that's what this book was to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think, over the sort of last few months that it's been out, I've been asked a lot about what next, and would I keep writing about stories that are very similar to what I wrote about? And my answer to that is often no.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I say that I so much had to write about Sierra Leone. I always say that. I so much had to write about this war. I so much had to look back, at this moment that had such an impact on my life in order to move forward,
Mm-hmm.
in order to be the writer that I knew I could become.
Mm-hmm.
I did not want to be, a writer that was stuck in a rut of one moment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and
To be fueled by only one
to
moment.
be fueled by only one moment, and it's a dramatic enough moment, certainly
Mm-hmm.
can provide a lot of fuel,
Mm-hmm.
and has, right, for so many years.
Mm-hmm.
I talk often about how so much of what I've written about has always been in one way or another about the war.
Mm-hmm.
It has provided a lot,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of
Knots to untie.
knots to untie. That's exactly it.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps this book was that not a sort of final knot in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And everything that was sort of unresolved in me
Mm-hmm.
went into this book.
Mm-hmm.
The first time I got to go back after the 12, plus years, um, was in the process of writing this book.
Mm-hmm.
It was when I decided I needed a break from grad school. My parents and I came together and decided that it was time for me to return.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a time also where the first time I made the decision that I wanted to write, and I wanted to find a way for writing to be what sustained me.
And that's how you express yourself
And that's how,
freely and
exactly. So it's, yeah, Holding Demons is so special, right?
mm-hmm.
It's my first time where I truly took some time to meditate on what I felt, the Civil War's impact on myself, and people around me had been.
And I remember that moment 2 years ago when you were at my wedding,
Mm-hmm.
that eve of my wedding, and there's a game, Two Truths and a Lie, that we try to test each other how much we know about each other.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned one statement
Mm-hmm.
that you were being pointed at by a AK-47 when you were 8 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And without a doubt, that was the most revealing moment of your past,
Mm.
of all these years of friendship,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that was just the starting of something that you will be confronting,
Exactly.
like voicing it out,
Mm-hmm.
loudly.
Exactly.
And that was a moment for me to witness, and now I'm witnessing this together with you and
Mm-hmm.
be able to facilitate that. I'm
Yeah.
really honored to be able to do that next to you.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, we talked earlier about the ways in which the title itself is very revealing. A lot of people sort of get struck by this title, I think.
Good
Holding
title.
Demons. It shows,
Read the book.
right? The title is always drawing people, and I think it's because it's definitely something that you don't. It's not something that only exists within a war setting. It's any form of trauma. What is it that you're holding, and are you making peace with it? And if you're
How do you
not,
move on?
or
How do you
can you
heal?
move on? How
Can
can you
you?
heal? These are the questions, and I think that is what pulls people to this text, whether or not they understand really the context in which I'm speaking to.
And for me, I haven't lived through war, but reading the text, I'm confronted with death, and
Mm.
um, a lot of us have been through death, and death in the family, death in friendships,
That's right.
and that in a basic human experience, that's a one connection point. You know, what happens when you lose someone, and then how do you deal with losing someone, whether or not it's in a war context. It's still pretty um it's still quite a journey to 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 regain the momentum to live for without that loved one,
That's true.
you know, in our regular life.
That's
So
true. And that's, and I think, as a writer, that's the dream
mhm,
for people to be able to relate to a text that way.
mhm,
I think one of my, favorite quotes out there is the idea that you write in such a personal way, right? You write so specifically to yourself, it is then able to relate to everyone,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
There's something about the essence of sort of the human experience
mhm,
that can be derived from almost anything you're living,
mhm,
and that's I want Holding Demons to be that, right?
mhm,
It was such a personal story to me.
mhm,
Again, I did not have intentions of publishing it. It
mhm.
is an accident and a blessing that it has gotten to the point where I was able to share it, not only with you, in terms of collaborating, but with others in terms of them reading it as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's a personal story. It is almost like reading the pages of someone's diary
Mhm.
and then having people come to me and being able to relate to the work,
And they can also be vulnerable.
and they can also be vulnerable,
Mhm,
because it's I it is a vulnerable work, right? It
mhm,
is a work, I think, with a lot of weight, that wasn't easy to write, but was so necessary.
mhm. And in a larger context, it's how we as artists be vulnerable to the product, to
Hmm.
like of what we create,
Hmm.
and how we push it out into this world,
Yeah.
and how we march on in
Hmm.
our very short journey. You know, we just started off. You
Hmm.
know, all the doubts of being emerging and young.
It's true, and and that's, I think, the greatness of being able to have worked with you in this. Both of us being at such the beginning point of our journeys as
Mm-hmm.
creatives, you as this full time artist, and myself really starting to be intentional about the writing that I'm doing. Um,
Mm-hmm. And teaming up with you um makes so much sense because there's an illusion that we're alone in this, that we're only working on our own career, our own journey
mm-hmm,
as individual, because this is a very individualistic expression. Art is thought to be that way,
mm-hmm,
but what is left out when we only look at the product is how much support
yeah,
mentally, spiritually,
mm-hmm,
and love and care
mm-hmm,
that we need from our own community,
mm-hmm,
our family, our friends, our
mm-hmm,
mentors, and that our collaboration right now, like, prove that it works,
yeah,
prove that our support for each other can give birth to
mm-hmm,
um great creative stuff,
yeah.
and that we're not alone in this sort of creative journey.
No, not at all. I think we hold each other.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we spoke about what it meant to have mentors that are peers.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, my ultimate mentors have been my peers, have been my friends, my best friends, like you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really about really, paying homage to what it means to have these relationships, as peers
Mm-hmm.
that stretch you,
Mm-hmm.
that make you grow in your art and become really the artist and creative you want to be.
And it help in terms of finding our own voice as well,
Exactly.
because I think we both work in a very similar way. We are very self-driven.
Hmm.
Like, once we get a sort of like a breakthrough point as we talk or figuring things out, and then we're like, okay, I know what's my next step.
Hmm.
So it's like it's not so much that we help each other find a strategy for our work,
Hmm.
but we give each other strength to actually come up with our own strategies in our own path.
That's exactly that. It's true.
Yeah.
It's that. That's a really that's a really good point. I like you said, we are both, we like to say we're self sufficient. We know how to do our own research. We know how to really go after the things we love. But I think ultimately, whenever you're choosing to do the creative thing, you run into moments in which doubts creep up
Yeah. Yeah.
about whether you're on the right path.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we come in for each other. I think
Yeah. Yeah.
we give the ultimate pep talks that tell each other, "You are a gifted and amazing artist, CJ. Keep at it."
Mm-hmm.
You know,
You're on the right track,
you're on the
Jasmine.
right. So yeah, and I think when people sort of see a product like this book, it's very hard to see how difficult it was to come to that moment.
Mm-hmm.
But the moment definitely is built on years of doubt and barriers and moments when we didn't think it was possible.
And also the readiness of self-edit, right? We talk about that, how we are ready to confront our own artistry and how we learn how to edit ourselves. Because self-doubt means I'm not sure what's my next step. But knowing how to self-edit is saying I am good enough to tell myself, cut out this, add this, put more this, and then present this is done, this is finished. Because a lot of artists, they couldn't even tell when their work is done.
Yeah. And the thing is, you have to, maybe and everyone is different, right? When it comes to their art, I'm of the persuasion that something may never be finished, but it's ready to be shared. And so I don't edit forever and ever and ever. At some point I'm like, I think my spirit feels like it's ready to go out there. And I let that be its reality.
My painting process is like that too. Like I know when I need to stop. It's like this is done. I might make little edits later, but the whole picture is done.
The whole picture is done.
Yeah. And what about some serendipitous moment when you sort of seek out the people to help you publish this book? Do you have?
I didn't seek out anything, and that's when something is really meant to be, because everything really did come together in a way where it was like I was in the right moment, right? What did they say about to be lucky is not just something's falling out of the sky, but it's to be prepared in the right moment
when the opportunity comes.
Yeah. So I had again written a piece that I had long forgotten, and I took a writing class, and I had my writing teacher who heard this piece and this whole class, and everyone there was silent and so receptive. And they said, "You are not allowed to not finish this. You are not allowed to leave us hanging." So for the rest of class, I would write the text. I would just add on and add on and add on. That was 3 years ago.
Wow.
And one day, even after this class, I remained in contact with my writing teacher, Nora, and she just would continue to support me, continue to encourage me, and tell me, "Don't drop this text now." And it didn't matter that I left the state at one point for a year. I moved out of North Carolina to Maryland. She would still email me and ask me what was going on. And it was really during that year that we did a lot of back and forth, and I would tell her about sort of the new directions I was going with Holding Demons.
And was it a verse then, or is it prose?
So it went through a lot. I think, by year 2, it had transitioned from prose to verse. And that was because I had such psychological blocks with prose. And that was for a myriad of reasons. But for some reason, verse comes much more naturally to me. And I felt like I was really trying to force the story. and the story just did not want to be told that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, so by year two, so the first things I read were prose,
Mm-hmm.
but I could not seem to move the story in that direction. So I eventually just switched to what had always been a natural language to me, which
Mm-hmm.
is verse. Um, but by the time I came back to North Carolina, which was that third year,
Yeah.
she just said, if you think it's done, I'll help you publish it.
Wow. Just like that.
Just like that. And for someone to believe so much in the work, because if it had just been me, I would have written it and just left it where it was.
Mm-hmm.
It was enough for me.
Yeah.
And it wasn't enough for her.
Mm.
She thought that other people needed to hear this story,
Mm.
And it was in that moment where, again, I felt like it was unfinished and I reached out to you. And
Mm.
before I knew it, both of us were being thrown into this world of publishing it and making it what it ended up being.
Mm-hmm. I remember asking for specific imagery that you have in your mind for each chapter.
Yeah. And I remember being like, oh my goodness. But then, my process of writing is very visual.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I, visual art is not my first art, but when I am writing, it is like I'm painting.
Mm.
And when people say they read my work, they always say that it's so visceral, like it's so in their head that they see it. And that's because when I am writing, I am seeing it
Mm-hmm.
so clearly.
Mm-hmm.
So that when you asked me that, I did have some very specific images I remember in my head. And it fit very naturally, I think, for me to have illustrations because it's such a visual work in its language.
Yeah.
Why not pull that out into actual visual images?
I mean, one of the painting piece I have in my series of Chinese painting, um, it's called Painting Poems.
Mm-hmm.
There's poems in paintings, and there's paintings and poems. It's one could not really live without the other.
And if someone asks, what's at the essence of holding demons in terms of it technically, it's that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's painting and poems, and there's poems in painting.
Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like it's been awesome having this conversation. We talk so much. Uh,
So much.
we talk so much, but I think, um, this is the first time we've had an opportunity to reflect on this book and to reflect on
And be together in the same
be
space
together in the same space
since the book is
has been released,
conceived.
conceived, released, and everything in between.
Yeah.
So we hope that you guys enjoyed hearing a little bit from us. We hope that you get the book. It's available on Amazon. It's available for your Kindle. And if you're in North Carolina, you could find it in some of the local bookstores around.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's again just been
Google holding demons in small jars.
holding demons in small jars and
See all our publicity,
mm-hmm,
Facebook events,
exactly.
what we've been up to.
Exactly. And we both have our personal Facebook pages as well.
Mm-hmm.
My writing page, which is just Jasmine Kumalah, writer, and CJ.
CJ Lu
Mm-hmm.
with space in between. SIJIELOO.
Mm-hmm. And the book has a page, and that's Holding Demons in Small Jars .tumblr.com. And so that's another way to keep up with us and to keep up with this amazing journey that we started and we hope to continue. This is the first of many collaborations to come. We as Nora, who's someone who's also been involved in our process, said, we indeed are on a path to much more creative work.
Mm-hmm.
So
I would like to kind of end this conversation with this thing I have just shared with Jasmine is that as we go further forward,
mm-hmm.
we actually go deeper in our past too. We understand ourselves much more deeper.
Mm-hmm.
from the sense of time and place and space. At the same time, have a very clear vision for the future as well.
Mm.
So we'll end at that.
We'll end at that. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Hi, everyone. This is Jasmine and CJ. We are the writer and illustrator, respectively, of Holding Demons in Small Jars. And we're really excited because we haven't seen each other in 2 years.